All right, welcome back. The last thing that we left off on from the first video is this right here. So subject pronouns are super important because they tell you which verb form to use. And your verbs are going to be the backbone of your language. So those two things, you really need to know those. So if you don't know your subject pronouns, flashcards, Quizlet, write them a gajillion times, whatever you need to do to learn them. Okay, so we're going to talk about present tense verbs here. We're going to talk about conjugating. Some of the language that I'm going to use on this slide is going to be really important that you guys actually know the language of grammar terms. So know what these terms mean. Okay. So when I talk about conjugating a verb, that is changing the infinitive of the verb based on who's doing the action. Okay. So when you're conjugating verbs, these are your steps. You need to underline the stem so you figure out what you're keeping. You need to drop the ending, which is going to be your AR, ER, or IR, and then you're going to add your new ending. And this process is going to be the same no matter what verb you're conjugating or what tense you're conjugating into. It's the same setup. So a verb that's conjugated into the present tense can mean that the subject verbs. So if, for example, I want to use hablar, to talk. So it can mean I talk. It can mean I am talking, or it can mean that I do talk. Okay, so we will choose the English equivalent based on what makes the most sense for what we're trying to translate the Spanish into English. But yo hablo can translate as any of those three things. So the subject verbs, the subject is verbing, or the subject does verb. Okay, and this one will be particularly helpful because we don't use this does verb. We don't have does in Spanish as a helping verb. Okay, so if I want to say like, oh, do you speak Spanish? I don't need a word for do because it's already included in my conjugated verb. Okay. So a verb that's not conjugated is called an infinitive, and that means to do something. So hablar is to talk, but in order for it to be like I talk, you talk, he or she talks, they talk, we talk, y'all talk, then I have to do these steps, okay? No one is doing the action when the verb is in the infinitive, okay? You need to know the terms conjugate and infinitive, okay? So conjugating is changing the verb based on the subject. Infinitive is when no one is doing the action. Spanish verbs end in either AR, ER, or IR. Okay, so let's look at our AR verbs. So again, we have our verb or our subject pronouns chart. UD is the abbreviation for ustedes. UDS is the abbreviation. UD is for usted. UDS is for ustedes. I think I misspoke. Sorry. Okay, so when I'm conjugating an AR verb, I'm going to drop the AR and I'm going to add O for the yo form. For the to form, I'm going to drop the AR. I'm going to add AS. For the usted ella form, I'm going to drop the AR and then just add A. Nosotros, drop the AR, add amos. Vosotros, drop AR, add ice. Okay, this is pronounced like ice, like ICE. The accent on the vosotros form always goes on the first vowel in the ending. You're going to want to put it on the I because you're like, oh, it should go on the I. No, it goes on the first vowel in the ending. Okay? And for ustedes, ellos, ellas, it ends. We take off the AR and we add AN. And you might ask me, well, why do we have to take off the AR? Can't I just take off the R? No. Okay. It's a good habit to get into of taking off the entire ending, or a thought process of taking off the entire ending, because when we get into different tenses, they don't always start with A for AR verbs. Okay. So like your endings for the preterite, the past, are different than our endings here. So they don't always have this A right here. Okay, so that's a habit that I need you to get into. Okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to conjugate this verb that's in parentheses. Okay, and then I want you to translate that sentence. You might need to use your book. You look in the glossary. Use the Quizlet with the verbs quiz. Oh, I'm sorry. With the verbs from Spanish 1, use that. Patinar is to skate, by the way. That's not one that we use very often. Okay, for number 5, when it's quien, even if we don't necessarily know what quien means, we know that it is singular because there's no S here. We know that it's not yo because it's not I, and we know that it's not two because it doesn't say two here. So when you're not sure, look at singular, plural, look for like yos and twos, and that will tell you which verb form to use. Process of elimination, it's on the singular side. There's no yo, there's no two, so we have to use the he, she form. Okay, so go ahead and write those out on your paper or on your keyboard, and then hit play when you're done so that way you can check your answers. Okay, number 1, it should be estudia. Ella estudia English. She studies English. Number 2, yo bailo mucho. I dance a lot. Number 3, nosotros hablamos por teléfono. We talk on the phone. Ellos usan la computadora durante la primera hora. They use the computer during first hour. Number 5, ¿quién necesita un bolígrafo? Who needs a pen? Number 6, ¿tú montas en bicicleta mucho? That's a question mark at the beginning. Do you ride your bike a lot? Number 7, ustedes dibujan muy bien en la clase de arte. Y'all draw very well in art class. Number 8, nosotras, patinamos hoy? No? We're skating today, right? Number 8, el profesor enseña la lección. The teacher teaches the lesson. And tus amigos y tú cantáis muy bien. You can also put cantan there if you're using the ustedes form. Okay? The next thing I want you to do is you have a verb, you have a table that has, or like a word bank that has different verbs. I want you to pick the one that makes the most sense and conjugate it into the sentences below. You have 8 verbs and there are only 6 sentences. So, you don't have the list on here. That's okay. You have it on your paper or on your notes. Okay, so go through, fill those in, hit play when you're done and check your answers. Okay, number 1, Lupe y Guillermo dibujan mucho en la clase de arte. Lupe and Guillermo draw a lot in art class. Number 2, tú usas la computadora en la clase de tecnología. You use the computer in tech class. Yo necesito, una calculadora y una carpeta para la clase de matemáticas. I need a calculator and a folder for our math class. Wrong way. Tomás y yo practicamos deportes en la clase de educación física. Tomás and I practice sports in PE class. ¿Quién enseña la clase de ciencias naturales? Who teaches science class? And Marta habla mucho en la clase de español. Marta talks a lot in Spanish class. Okay. We're going to be focusing a lot on the present tense for now. We're going to get a few irregular verbs. We're going to get a few different types of verbs, but this is the main process that we're going to be working with for right now. ER verbs. ER verbs, we're doing pretty much the same thing. We're dropping the ER and then we're adding these endings. So if you remember for our AR verb chart, these are exactly the same, except instead of A's, it's E's. So O es A, I got distracted. O es A, amos, ace, N. This EIS is pronounced like ace, like ACE, like, in volleyball, they got an ace serve, okay, or the ace of spades. Again, your accent mark goes on the first vowel in the ending, okay? Now let's look at our IR verb charts. Our ER and IR verbs are generally really similar. So for your IR verbs, they are exactly the same as your ER verbs, so O es A, O es A, and then we get a little bit different, emos and es. So IR verbs are going to have I's here, and then ENs, which is the same as it is for ER verbs. So these 4 are the same as ER verbs. It's only these 2 that are different, okay? You have on your paper, I think I have it on here as well, you have a short email or a short letter, like a postcard. What I want you to do is I want you to pick the verb that makes the most sense and then conjugate it appropriately. Okay, this might be a little bit tricky. Do your very best. Okay, Caracas is the capital of Venezuela. That's a country in South America. And then querida just means dear. Like, dear Amalia, Elena y yo estamos en Caracas. Elena and I are in Caracas. Okay, and then it talks about their day. Okay, so hit pause, fill in the blanks, and then hit play when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, number one should have been corremos. Nosotras corremos todos los días. We run every day. Y comemos muy bien, and we eat really well. Okay, it wouldn't make much sense to say and we see really well. Okay, which would be what it was if you picked fair. Los estudiantes aquí comen mucha pizza. The students here eat a lot of pizza y beben mucho café, and they drink a lot of coffee. Ellos leen muchos libros. They read a lot of books. So leen, we are going to pronounce both E's, leen. Muchos libros y escriben, and they write mucho también para las clases, write a lot in class. Las clases, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Las clases son difíciles, pero me encantan. The classes are difficult, but I love them. En la clase de español, nosotros leemos revistas y cuentos en español. We read magazines and stories in Spanish. Elena comprende muy bien, pero para mí es un poco difícil. Tengo que estudiar. Hasta luego, tu amiga Carolina. Okay, Elena understands really well, but for me, it's a little difficult. Your friend, Carolina. Okay, and then in this next section, again, you have a word bank. You'll use these more than once. So the words that you have are comer, beber, comprender, escribir, and compartir. Okay. On number 6, una carta is a letter. Okay. So hit pause, hit play when you're ready to check your answers. Okay. Number 1 should be comparte or come. So Antonio shares or eats his fries with Amelia. Y'all eat cheese sandwiches, should be comen. Yo como las salchichas en el desayuno. I eat sausages for breakfast. Nosotros bebemos el té helado. We drink iced tea. Ana comprende la tarea. Ana understands the homework. And tú escribes una carta al profesor. You write a letter to the teacher. Number 7, again, you should have comparto or como. I share bread with Jorge or I eat bread with Jorge. El bebe el jugo de naranja en el desayuno. He drinks orange juice for breakfast. Nosotros escribimos con un lápiz. We write with a pencil. Paula y Guillermo hablan y comprenden el español. They speak and understand Spanish. And bebes tu leche en el desayuno. Okay. You drink milk for breakfast. Okay, I think I have enough time to get through there and estar. Okay. Some of our verbs are irregular. What that means is they don't follow the normal conjugation rules. Those verbs have to be memorized. The irregular verbs that you have learned are these. And then there's also ear. Let me add that one on there. You've also learned ear, which is to go. Okay. So let's talk about ser and estar really quick. We've used these in class recently. So estar and ser both mean to be. We're going to get into how to use them appropriately in the first couple of chapters of this year. So eres, soy, eres, es, somos, sois, and son. There's no accents anywhere on here. Estar, also to be, estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. Accents all over the place. If you do not put your accents on a verb and it needs an accent, I take off the entire point. Okay? Especially with estar, because estas with no accent means these, esta no accent means this. It changes the whole meaning of it. For the most part, since they both mean to be, to say how you feel or where you are, always use the verb estar. Okay, that's a general rule. We're going to get more specifics with that as we go. Okay, if you have any questions about this, shoot me an email. Let me know. I'm going to do the next video now. Aren't you excited? We don't have too much left to review. All right, have a great day. Adios.